You are listening to a live transmission from a small coastal station on the Maine shore. My name is Daniel Pike. I am 51 years old, a licensed amateur operator, former freelance maritime weather observer, and the caretaker for a decommissioned lighthouse near Pemaquid Point. The tower is closed to tours in winter and open in summer when the ocean is kind, but the radio never sleeps. I keep a modest studio in the keeper's house with a fixed antenna on the roofline, a backup battery array in the cellar, and a diesel generator that I test every week whether I need it or not. If you are hearing my voice on your speaker, your phone, or a neighbor's kitchen radio pulled from a cupboard full of old recipes, I am live. I am looking at a clock that reads 8:11 in the evening, Eastern Time, and the barometer needle is steady. The sea is not. The world is not. I began tonight like any other late session, building a picture of the weather and traffic on the water. The offshore buoy east of Monhegan reported a mild swell out of the southeast. A lobsterman out of Round Pond called in to say he would not be setting gear until morning because his outboard refused to idle. Then my phone buzzed with a short message from a friend in Boston who helps maintain emergency communication vans. It read only this: "Look up." I stepped outside onto the porch and looked past the black stripe of pines at a sky that seemed to hold its breath. There was no streak, no tail, no stuttering aircraft beacon, just a disk of night with a dim smear against Cassiopeia that did not move with the wind. I could have read meaning into anything, but I went back inside because habit is stronger than excitement, and because people rely on calm voices when the signal thins. At 8:19, the international feed I rebroadcast for the early hour cut to silence. Not crackle, not carrier. Silence. The small digital screen showed a frozen timestamp. I switched to a secondary network and got a burst of tone that mapped to an emergency operations test pattern. The test never arrived on schedule. I looked at the second handset, the one that sits on 7.400 megahertz in the evenings, where hobbyists and skippers talk weather or trade signal reports. The voice that filled the room was a truck driver on Interstate 85 somewhere near Petersburg, Virginia. He said the sky had gone strange behind a layer of thin cloud. He said a circle was there if you did not stare at it directly. Another caller from White Plains spoke over him without meaning to. She said her dog would not stop whining and that she tried to film the sky, but the autofocus chased something that was not visible. I will be clear. What I am relaying has the shape of rumor until it is confirmed. I will give locations and names when I can, and I will tell you when I cannot. A railroad dispatcher in Harrisburg, who sometimes checks in to test his rooftop antenna, said Amtrak signaled a precautionary hold on a pair of northbound trains outside Philadelphia after tower crews reported strange reflections on the radar used for bird flocks. He did not claim an object was visible to the eye. He said the radar showed a large stationary return over the Schuylkill that did not read as weather. I can hear the hum through the desk now. Not a vibration, and not feedback. It is closer to the feeling you get when a transformer is near, somewhere behind a wall. If you are at home, you may not notice anything at all, and that is for the best. If you are driving, focus on the road. If you are on a boat, clip in and mind your position. I am going to read a short list of locations from messages that reached me in the last 10 minutes. These are not verified by any national desk. They are reports from people who left a voice note or called on the band and gave a street or coordinate. Over Manhattan, 3 independent callers described a set of faint concentric rings high above Midtown, not moving with the jet stream. Over London, a listener tuned from Greenwich said a wide shadow crossed the face of the moon without a matching cloud. Over Kiev, a merchant seaman passing through Borispil earlier today left a note saying airport staff were watching a symmetrical glimmer over the city that had no aircraft lights. Over Tokyo, a pair of shortwave listeners near Odaiba said a field of fine metallic dust was drifting down that did not cling like ash. I do not publish fear. I publish detail, and the detail is this. The bandwidth of the emergency satellite feed is being reclaimed in intervals. That is normal for maintenance. It is not normal at 8:30 in the evening on a weekday when international desks are staffed. A local fire captain in Portland, Maine, whom I know by first name, sent a single line that read, "Power company says to expect brief dips." 10 seconds later, the studio lights blinked and came back. The battery array caught it. If you live in New England and you are seeing lights dim in unison across a neighborhood, that suggests a grid reaction and not a single line fault. Keep your flashlights handy. You are listening to the only audio I can transmit with confidence until the larger networks return. For those who care about the technicalities, I am pushing this through the broadband link and mirroring it across the high-frequency band I habitually monitor. Listeners have confirmed reception on 3.500 MHz and 7.150 MHz lower sideband, and one international receiver reported me on 10.125 MHz by skip. If that number means nothing, ignore it and keep the radio near. Calls are coming in faster than I can answer, and I will prioritize those that help people stay safe. A nurse from Jamaica Plain says ambulances in her area have been told to hold at stations unless a life-threatening call cannot be delayed. A security guard at a museum in Washington says the night crew was told to usher patrons out early due to a communications drill. A pilot who diverted to Bangor for fuel said air traffic control issued a ground stop for a window and then released aircraft with routes that avoid the coast by a broad margin. None of these facts confirm the center of the story. They do confirm that large systems are making changes. I am going to play back a 30-second clip from a listener in Paris who sent the audio with permission to rebroadcast. It is a crowd in the courtyard of a cathedral at dusk. You will hear voices in French, then a hush that feels imposed from above. After that, there is a regular rhythmic tone, too clean to be a siren. I am told this tone is not from a police car and not from a church bell. I cannot verify the origin. I will keep the level low. There. That was the full clip. The hum in this room changes whenever the rhythmic tone is present on other recordings. If you are an engineer and you have ideas about induced current from a wide area emitter or unusual ionospheric conditions, send me your analysis. Keep it simple and grounded. I do not have instruments beyond the basic scope and the audio meters on this console. A caller from Newark says a pale dust is on windshields along Frelinghuysen Avenue. He says the dust does not smear like pollen. He says it beads like metal powder. Do not touch unknown powder with bare hands. Use gloves. Do not inhale dust. Close car vents, set to pull outside air. If you have an N95 mask from a worksite, it will filter fine particulate matter. If you do not, use a clean cloth and stay inside with windows shut until we know more. International context. A maritime operator in Reykjavik reports multiple fishing vessels switched to low power and drift to conserve fuel after a regional advisory suggested a temporary blackout of deck lighting. The advisory did not cite cause. A listener in Sydney says the late news rolled a brief clip of a large circular shadow cast across the harbor that moved slowly and then stopped. The anchor did not use the word craft and did not use the word aircraft. The anchor used the phrase unidentified object. We have a municipal update from New York City. A friend at an emergency desk in Lower Manhattan texted that bridges are open but patrols are slowing traffic to prevent gridlock. That is a reasonable measure. If you are listening from Queens or Brooklyn, do not attempt to cross the river unless you must. If you are in the city core, pick one location with food, water, and power outlets, and stay there. A theater, a library, a hotel lobby with a generator. Panic is not useful. I grew up in Massachusetts. I have spent most of my adult life on this coast. The ocean is a clock, and tonight the sweep hand is not moving as it should. I can feel the lighthouse tower behind this wall like a shoulder blade under a shirt. The lamp is off, because the Coast Guard retired this beacon years ago, but the glass still faces the dark, and the iron stairs still hold the memory of footsteps. If you are alone, do not narrate danger in your head. Narrate checklists. Water, light, phone power, battery for radio. Charge now while the grid is stable. The first official notice of the hour. The National Weather Service feed just pushed a non-weather message. It states that atmospheric disturbances have been observed over multiple regions, and that these disturbances may affect satellites, navigation signals, and power reliability. It does not mention cause. It recommends that the public avoid unnecessary travel, conserve battery power, and follow local authority instructions. The feed is genuine. A long-haul driver who goes by Cole checked in from a rest area near Allentown. He says the rest area is crowded even though the highway is not closed. Drivers are standing by their rigs looking up, then looking at each other without speaking. He said none of them could decide which way to look to feel safe. He asked if the object makes wind as a helicopter would. I told him no one has reported rotor wash. I told him sound is not a guide. He asked if it is ours. I am not in a position to answer. I have a second from London. A listener recorded a video on the South Bank near Blackfriars. The river looks dark. Office windows are lit. A pale dim halo moves overhead and the reflections on the glass do not match any known aircraft profile. The halo stops and spreads into a ring with a core that looks starless. The person filming does not shout. No one in the clip shouts. The sound that accompanies the ring is a series of tones at equal spacing, a ladder that climbs and then resets. If I slow the audio by a factor of 2, the harmonics line up at intervals that are not random. That is as far as I will speculate. A retired air traffic controller from Manchester, New Hampshire, left a calm message. He said primary radar returns can fail if the target is designed to absorb or scatter. He said what matters is the secondary network and the phone calls between towers. He said if towers are moving aircraft wide around certain fixes, that tells you where the hole is. He told me to say that and nothing more. I have said it. I am receiving an unusual number of notes from schools, hospitals, and houses of worship that close doors early. That can be caution. It can also be a way to get staff home while public transit still runs on schedule. If you are responsible for others, resist the urge to make big moves in the first hour. Sit down with a pen and write a plan for the next 2 hours. Food, water, batteries, people. If you have a neighbor who struggles with stairs, knock now and ask if there is anything they need moved closer. Make that the shape of your action. The sky above this part of Maine now has an edge in the north that is not aurora and not distant lightning. It looks like fog, where fog does not belong. If you are near Camden or Rockland and can describe the northern sky in one sentence without drama, send that one sentence. I will read a few to give a picture. Here they are as I typed them. A checkout clerk says the northern sky looks like a cloud pressed flat and held in place. A sailor on a mooring in Rockport says the stars have dimmed inside a circle, the size of his outstretched arms held at full length. A teenager in Thomaston writes that streetlights feel weak and that the sound of the highway is thin, as if someone laid a rug over the noise. International verification just reached me from a ship in the Atlantic halfway to the Azores. The officer of the watch says the radar shows a return ahead without a surface echo. That is, the screen paints a shape in the sky, and the sea below it stays clean. He logged bearing and range, and changed course, 15 degrees without alarm. He says the crew can see nothing with the naked eye, except stars that seem edited. I need to address a topic that will appear in chat rooms and then spill into living rooms. Words like invasion and contact carry weight. I am not qualified to apply either. I can say that multiple cities report coordinated airborne phenomena that are not storms and not aircraft. I can say those phenomena hold position over landmarks and over open water. I can say that the tone many of you sent samples of has a structure that does not match a siren or a known public warning. Those are statements. I will keep to statements. For those of you with radios in Europe, you can try the band around 5.000 megahertz tonight if the higher bands feel quiet. The ionosphere is misbehaving. I am receiving stations from Spain, Ukraine, and Scotland, stepping on one another in a way that suggests a disturbed layer. Technical listeners who can record and send waterfall images. Keep your files small and your notes plain. A municipal utility worker in Chicago says traffic signals are being set to flashing red in some districts to reduce grid draw and encourage caution. That is wise, even if some drivers will not like it. A resident near O'Hare saw a circular reflection in an office tower that did not line up with the clouds. A caller from the South Loop reported a fine dust like silver pollen and said it melted into nothing when brushed with a damp towel. I do not know the composition. Treat unknown residue with care. Listeners in Kyiv have managed to push through with brief texts. One reads, "Over Maidan, the sky looks like glass held above us." Another reads, "The metro remains open and calm. If you are listening from Ukraine, I will repeat the simplest checklist. Choose one metro stop that feels safe if you need shelter. Keep your phone charged. Keep water in a bottle. Keep a small towel to cover your mouth and nose if dust is present. Call your family to share where you intend to be. A coastal listener in Cornwall says the offshore wind farm blinked off and then on as if someone turned down the brightness of the world for a second. The timing corresponds to a small dip on the UK grid frequency chart that another listener posted. If the grid operators are load shedding in small slices to protect infrastructure, that is prudent. Remember, controlled dips are not collapse. They are defense. I have a low, regular interference now on the studio monitor that climbs and falls every 12 seconds. I placed a handheld recorder near the speaker and walked outside to the porch. The interference ceased when I stepped beyond the threshold and started again when I returned. If this sound is carried on wiring as an induced field, someone else with a home studio will hear it. If it is only in this house, that is my problem. The dog across the road who barks at everything is silent. That tells me little and everything at once. We have a credible note from a ground observer in Colorado Springs who volunteers with a Skywatch group. He writes that a circular dimming moved over the front range and then held position above the city, centered somewhere near the University District. He says star occultation within the circle is precise, as if a disk covers the sky. He says no wind. He says the circle began producing the same step tone we have heard from Europe. Local authorities requested that residents avoid outdoor gatherings for the hour. A newsroom contact in Toronto reports that several stations agreed to coordinate their language. They are saying unidentified objects. They are not saying balloons. They are not saying drones. They are not making comparisons beyond that. The coordinated script includes a request for the public to reduce non-essential driving to prevent congestion near hospitals and bridges. I am receiving questions about water. For those on public systems, utilities will continue to treat and pump unless power is interrupted for extended periods. Fill containers now in case of precautionary pressure drops. For those on wells, charge any portable power banks you have while the mains are stable. If you own a small generator, test it outside in clear air with the exhaust away from windows. Do not operate any generator inside a garage or basement. We have a clear visual from a pilot flying a cargo route from Anchorage to Seattle who diverted inland. He describes a faint circular seam in the sky ahead with a margin that held steady no matter his angle. He reduced altitude under instruction and passed beneath the phenomenon with no turbulence. He said the radios hissed at a fixed pitch as he crossed a line, then cleared as if a switch were thrown. He landed safely in Spokane. A museum conservator in Rome sent an audio clip recorded from a rooftop. The tone we have heard appears again, but a second voice rides under it. Not a voice exactly, more a thin whistle that slides and holds. Slides and holds. If this is a beat frequency between two emitters, it is the first time I have heard it. If it is an artifact of a phone microphone, then we will discard it when better instruments weigh in. A question I can answer. Where should you go if you are outside and feel uneasy? Choose a place with a roof and walls, and an interior room. Choose a building you know. Avoid getting stuck in a crowd. Keep your head up and your pace measured. If you feel the urge to film, ask yourself if you will need both hands free in 30 seconds. Put the phone in your pocket if the answer is yes. That is all the guidance I can give from a small room in Maine with a hum through the desk and a tower that remembers light. We have a strong report from Tokyo, confirmed by 2 separate listeners in Shinjuku. The circular dimming that people have described stabilized over the city center and then produced a grid of faint lines inside the circle like a fishing net thrown gently. The lines pulsed from center to edge and back. During the pulses, some phones lost signal for a few seconds and then returned. Trains continued to run. Street traffic slowed. People stood still and listened. That pattern has power. I am now receiving the tone directly on the main feed at a low level, much lower than the content, as if a carrier underneath has been allowed to leak. I will play 10 seconds of silence from the studio. It will sound like nothing. If you are wearing headphones, you may hear a ladder of notes. That is the tone. Thank you. We will return to normal level. If this is intentional, then someone wants us to hear the pattern without panic. If it is unintentional, then the overlap will be corrected by engineers upstream. Messages from South America arrive slowly, and I will not rush them. A teacher in Bogotá says the sky above Monserrate took on a faint oval smudge that blocked a small cluster of stars. A port worker in Valparaiso says cranes paused while operators stood in cabs and listened. A hiker outside Mendoza said the lights in his group's headlamps drifted in brightness as if something were playing with the line. These are careful observations. None of them claims more than what is seen. If you are looking for official language from Washington, the most recent statement is that authorities are aware of aerial phenomena in multiple regions, that there is no immediate indication of hostile action, and that agencies are coordinating with international partners. That is the sentence. It is measured, as such sentences are designed to be. If stronger language arrives, I will read it verbatim. A listener from Jerusalem wrote that the ring overhead touched the top of the old city like a shadow that would not move, and that the tone softened when it passed over. A listener in Cairo sent a night photo of the Nile that shows a smooth circle in the sky where stars are missing. When cameras struggle, I trust the account and not the pixels. We now have a repeating sequence on the tone that resolves to groups of 5 pulses, separated by a long pause. If you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then hold your breath for the length of another 5, you can feel the pattern in your chest. A mathematician who called earlier says the interval is not random. She says it could be framing, the way a signal defines the edges of its message. She stresses could. She resists big words. I appreciate that. A question about planes. Commercial flights are diverting around the largest phenomena when possible. That is wise. Some flights are landing short or holding on the ground. That is also wise. If you are at an airport with a ticket in your hand, approach a counter with patience. The person there did not make the sky. If you are meeting someone, pick a spot and stick to it. Move only when you have information, not rumor. To those alone in apartments and dorm rooms and hotel rooms, you are not missing some special sight by staying inside. The recording I have here from Singapore shows a sheet of night that has been punched in a perfect circle. It is less dramatic than the words make it sound. What is powerful is the stillness below it. Cars roll. People walk. Phones rise. Then the phones lower. No one knows where to put their hands. The emergency feed just pushed a note to local stations asking for patience with short outages. The note adds that water treatment facilities and hospitals are protected by priority power. That is a plan. That is what plans look like in real time. If you are in a building with emergency lighting, find the locations of stairwells now, rather than when the lights go down. That will be useful in any event. I am going to step outside for 10 seconds with a portable transceiver and see if the hum changes on the porch. I will leave the studio microphone up so you can hear the room. The clock reads 9:02. I will be back by 9:03. I am back. The porch carried no hum. The sky to the north carries that pressed cloud the clerk described. The ocean is quiet as a held breath. A skunk wandered the yard boundary and changed its mind. That is the field report. While I was out, 3 messages stacked on the screen. One is from a friend in Boston who said the Prudential Tower has a ring of light reflected around the top floor that does not come from any known source. One is from a bus driver in Barcelona who said riders did not argue about seats for once and gazed through the windows with the posture of people in a museum. One is from a priest in a small town in Poland who said he opened the chapel for anyone who wanted to sit together. He asked me not to use his name. I respect that. I have been asked by several listeners if I believe we are seeing the first public contact with something not of this world. I will answer without theater. I do not know. I do not think anyone with authority will say so tonight. What I can say is that the scale and regularity of the reports, the global distribution, the similar behavior of the phenomena, the shared tone, and the restraint shown by utilities and agencies suggest 2 things. First, this is not imagination. Second, there is an interest in control rather than disruption. Those are observations, not conclusions. For coastal communities near me, here is the practical list again. Charge phones, fill water, check flashlight batteries. Keep a radio with fresh batteries nearby. If you must drive, fuel now and park with the nose pointed out for an easy exit. If you are on the water, Check your navigation lights and stay within your comfort zone. Share your position and plan with someone on land and stick to it. I want to read a short roll of places to remind all of us that the world is larger than the screen in our hand. Reykjavik, Dublin, Glasgow, London, Marseille, Barcelona, Naples, Athens, Kiev, Warsaw, Berlin, Stockholm, Reykjavik, again because it frames the Atlantic like a bookend. Reykjavik reports a faint ring over the water. London, a dim circle over the city core. Kiev, a glass sky. Athens, a soft halo. The pattern is everywhere and nowhere. There is a fresh sound under the tone now. It is not a separate note, more a ripple that runs down the ladder and back up. If you have a musician's ear, you will hear it as a delay line. If you have a mechanic's ear, you will hear it as a bearing rolling along a track. It repeats every 90 seconds. I will not call it language. I will call it a system. From the Pacific Northwest, a park ranger near Mount Rainier reported a faint shadow overhead that resolved into a perfect circle, then drifted until it was centered on the park headquarters. The shadow stopped. Visitors stood with hands in pockets and said nothing for a long time. The ranger said birds continued to move normally. If this were a pressure wave, the birds would react. They did not. If you are in an apartment above a busy street and want quiet, put on a kettle and listen to it. The sound will tell you if the power dips. The whistle will tell you when to turn the burner off. When events exceed understanding, the small loop of water and heat and steam can be an anchor. That is not a metaphor. That is advice from someone who lives alone with a lantern room for a neighbor. We have a concise note from a hospital administrator in Montreal. Elevators are operating. Emergency power checked. Staff asked to prepare for a surge of anxious visitors rather than injuries. That matches the moment. If you are tempted to visit an emergency room to see activity, do not. Stay home unless you need care. Let the staff work. I am paging through older messages to see the earliest times. The first text I received tonight with a location and the word circle was 7:42 from a bicyclist on the East River Greenway in New York. The first recorded tone with the stepladder pattern arrived at 7:58 from a listener in Lisbon. The first dust report came at 8:06 from Newark. The first ring over a capital outside North America arrived at 8:12 from London. If you are making your own timeline, mark those. A maritime station in Halifax says small craft are being advised to remain within harbors overnight. That is a conservative posture and a smart one if navigation signals fluctuate. A pilot in the Mediterranean reported that his approach lights looked dim at the edge of the ring and bright outside it. He landed safely in Naples with a normal rollout. He said the tower sounded calm. I have a question from a caller in Kansas with a ham license who wants to know if higher frequency bands will be usable tomorrow. If the layer stays disturbed, expect lower frequencies to outperform. That is the short answer. If you do not know what that means, do not worry. Your phone will be your lifeline if the mains hold. Your battery radio will be your lifeline if the mains blink. Either way, a human voice on the other end clears more fog from the mind than any graph. The northern sky above this house now shows a second ring outside the first, like a ripple around a coin dropped into velvet. It is faint enough that I question my own eyes. A neighbor who lives half a mile up the road just texted unprompted to say the same. That parallel report makes me bolder. 2 rings. Stationary. No sound beyond the tone and the soft interference in the wires. International feeds are slowly returning, carrying the same measured language. Unidentified objects present over multiple cities. No immediate evidence of kinetic action. Public advised to remain calm and indoors when possible. Consult local authorities. Expect intermittent communication disruptions. All nations requesting restraint and cooperation. That is the chorus. I am receiving one more type of report. Crowds that become quiet at the same time the tone reaches a louder peak, then move again when the tone dips. This happened on the Thames. It happened on the Charles. It happened on a freeway outside Los Angeles when drivers pulled to the shoulder and stood beside doors without speaking. It happened on a plaza in Seoul. If the tone engages something in the human ear that calls for stillness, that is both simple and profound. We are 53 minutes past the hour. I am going to summarize in plain sentences for those who tuned in late. Large circular dimmings of the sky have appeared over many cities around the world. They hold position above landmarks and harbors and open spaces. A regular set of tones accompanies many of them. Power grids are dipping in controlled ways, and utilities are acting to keep hospitals and water systems stable. Air traffic is diverting around the largest circles. Dust that seems metallic has been reported in a few locations. No official statement has used the word contact. No official statement has used the word hostile. The best public advice is to stay put, avoid crowds, conserve battery power, and look after neighbors. We go now to the cities I named in order. New York. A listener in Midtown who works nights in building maintenance sent a clear description and a short clip taken from a stairwell window facing north. A circular object the size of several city blocks hangs above the park, its underside not bright and not dark, more like moonlight held in place. As of 10 minutes ago, a second layer slid out around the rim, revealing what looked like open panels. Through those openings, shapes moved. Not people, not anything familiar. He wrote that the motion reminded him of fish under ice when a headlamp is tilted at an angle. Smooth, coordinated, turning as a flock turns, but with sharper edges. The soundtrack on his clip is city noise and a faint tone doing its step pattern. The buildings are steady. The voices below are steady. The object holds position. London. Two separate listeners on opposite banks of the Thames described something identical. The ring over the city resolved into a plain disc with a rim. The rim began to pulse with segments that lit in sequence, like a slow clock. Between the segments, a translucent curtain fell halfway toward the river and stopped. Within that curtain, lines that looked like ladders drifted down and then retracted. The nearest comparison they could offer was a jellyfish trailing filaments that do not mix with water. Police kept bridges open but reduced speeds. The sound, when present, was the 5-note ladder we have heard for an hour. The curtain did not touch ground. It did not release anything. It hung and then pulled itself back. Kyiv. Messages arrive in short lines because power is precious. A photo taken near Maidan shows the same circular absence of stars we have seen elsewhere, but now there are 3 points inside the circle arranged like a triangle that rotates slowly. Witnesses report a very thin column of light that lowers to a rooftop, touches nothing, and climbs. No one on the ground reports heat, wind, or vibration. The metro remains open. The streets are orderly. The tone is present, lower in volume than before. Tokyo. Listeners in Shinjuku and Shibuya report that the grid of lines seen inside the circle has brightened. Along those lines, small ovals the size of a passenger van descended to what seems a fixed altitude above towers, stopped, and then fanned out. One listener described the surfaces as mirror black, until lights in nearby signs reflected on them and revealed shallow hexagonal panels that shifted like scales. Several of those ovals aligned over major intersections and simply hovered. No sound from the ovals. No downwash. Trains continued to run. The tone from the main disc rose one step and held. Sydney. Over the harbor, a round shadow consolidated into a clean-edged plate. Along the plate's rim, 12 glows appeared at even spacing. From 3 of them, pale beams traced geometric shapes over the water as if mapping, not writing. Ferries paused. A lifeboat crew near Circular Quay watched the beams draw a triangle, then a circle, then a set of parallel lines that marched outward until they faded. Birds kept flying. The air stayed quiet. The beams did not touch any vessel. I know the phrase "aliens now visible" is moving through your minds, your rooms, and your group chats. I will not decorate the moment. What we can say is that structures within the disks are visible with the unaided eye. Smaller objects separate and hold station at low altitude. In a few places, surfaces inside the main objects can be seen moving, revealing patterns and forms that do not match man-made aircraft. That is visibility. That is the limit of what I can claim. The tone sequence. Engineers listening along have sent me simple notes. I asked for simple, and you delivered. One says the 5-note ladder follows ratios close to whole number steps and could be a framing marker. Another notes that the long pause after each ladder is consistent across recordings from London, New York, and Tokyo, to within 1/10 of a second when you correct for phone clock drift. A third suggests that the ripple I described under the ladder could be a second channel offset in time so that interference throws a slow beat. None of these messages use the word code. All use the word system. Locally, the two rings over the north have condensed into one. The edge sharpens and softens like breath on glass. I left the studio for a minute and stood on the porch with a small handheld set tuned to 7.055 megahertz. The air smelled of wet iron the way it does before snow. As I watched, 3 small shapes detached from the main circle at this latitude and slid in smooth arcs toward the sea, stopping over open water a half-mile off the rocks. They are visible to the naked eye as ovals the length of a city bus with a seam around the middle. They hold their place like boats at anchor would if the ocean were still. I am not alone seeing them. A lobsterman named Brett, who lives up the road and knows this coastline better than his own hands, called to say the same. He used the word polite. He said those things are polite, like cautious boats coming into a crowded harbor and waiting to be told where to go. He asked if he should train a spotlight on them. I told him no. I told him to keep lights low and watch. He laughed the way people laugh when they do not want to wake others in the house, and said, "Fine, no lights. I will make tea and sit on the step." That is as human as any guidance I can give. Across the Atlantic, an air traffic controller in Spain who retired last year still speaks to friends in the tower. He reports that several airports are spacing inbound flights because of altitude restrictions under the discs. Controllers are telling pilots to expect longer downwinds and wider patterns. The pilots acknowledge calmly. A pilot from Lisbon described a visual on the disk surface as being like ripples in brushed metal that form and vanish. He said nothing struck the aircraft. He said the radio hissed at a fixed pitch when crossing a boundary and then cleared. That matches what a cargo pilot over the Pacific described earlier. I want to be careful about the next piece because it touches emotion as much as fact. In several cities, people report seeing silhouettes behind translucent panels inside the discs. The words vary: figures, shapes, stands of dark reeds, antennae that move together, a shifting bank of vertical fins. In a few reports, a pair of larger forms stand still while smaller elements drift in patterns around them. If you come from a world of flight and fabrication, you might call them structures. If you come from a world of biology, you might say the words living architecture. We do not know. We only have silhouettes. For those of you near screens, satellite images from public feeds are scarce and delayed, and that is normal on a night like this. Do not build theories from low-resolution stills. If you are tempted to use aircraft tracking apps as a guide, remember that not every aircraft broadcasts, and not every broadcast is available to the public in real time. Look out a window instead. Focus on what your senses confirm. Reports from hospitals continue to be measured. Administrators in Boston, Montreal, and Chicago are preparing for arrivals based on anxiety, not injury. If you are feeling unsteady, drink water and sit. If you feel you must go outside to see, step out, look once, and step back in. Do not assemble a crowd. Do not stand in a street. Give emergency vehicles room. Now to the first close-range description of a smaller object at street level that I consider credible. A transit worker in Queens, assigned to maintenance on an elevated line, watched an oval descend to a position level with the platform, then slide along the tracks as if measuring the route. It stopped near a service ladder, rotated a few degrees, and a faint band of light formed along its seam. The band rippled, not bright enough to hurt the eyes. The object then backed away along the same line, paused, and rose. The worker described the surface as like wet stone, with stars reflecting in it. He could not see any protrusions. He heard no sound. There is a change in the tone ladder. The pause after each set of 5 is now shorter by a narrow margin. I ask those of you recording on stable clocks to confirm. The overall volume here has dropped slightly. The hum through the studio wiring is less. My guess? and it is a guess, is that the objects are stabilizing their own emissions as they settle into position. Communications engineers among you will understand that sinks and sources can cause drifts until systems lock. I want to share something from the other side of the world to widen our frame. A radio amateur in Christchurch, New Zealand, wrote that the disk over the city was visible at dawn. The sun lit the rim in a way no photograph has fully captured. He described a brief moment when the rim glowed and a set of thin pylons stood out within the circle, like the frame of a great umbrella that you usually do not see until the fabric is translucent. He counted 12 pylons, evenly spaced, with small nodes at half height. The nodes winked on and off in the same 5-note rhythm, then stayed on. He said the birds did not change their flight. He went inside and made breakfast for his kids. He told them school would be at home for a day. I am scrolling through the messages for practical questions I can answer. People ask about water safety under these things. Utilities are monitoring intakes and pressure. There is no sign of contamination from any dust that fell earlier. That dust, where it was most reported, seemed to melt into nothing on contact with moisture. If that is a real physical effect, then rain will clear it. If it was a residue from an ambient process, it will fade. Either way, avoid collecting it, avoid inhaling it, wipe surfaces with a damp cloth, and wash your hands. A more personal note from a listener in Rome who works nights cataloging artworks. He stood on a roof and watched a smaller oval hover above a courtyard. He said the oval cast a shadow only when a streetlight hit it. The shadow moved like liquid across stone because the surface is not flat. He said he felt no fear, only the need to describe what he saw so he would not forget details. He counted the panels. He noted a very faint glow at the seam. He wrote the words, "Thank you for being calm," on the air. That is enough to keep a tired voice upright. I am going to try something careful. For 10 seconds I will lower my voice and allow the room tone to rise, so you can hear the ladder if your speakers are good enough. Listen for 5 steps and a pause. Then 5 again. If you hear something under it, like a rolling wave, that is the ripple. Thank you. Returning to level. If you are hearing none of this, that is fine. It means your room is normal. We have the first clear statement from a major scientific body without interpretive gloss. Several observatories with all-sky cameras have posted raw sequences showing the circles forming, holding, and then developing contour. The cameras capture a consistent geometry. Edges are clean. Motion is smooth. Stars behind are occluded rather than refracted. That suggests surfaces rather than fields, though both may be present. The observatories refrain from any claim beyond geometry. Geometry is enough. I am watching the 3 ovals over the water off this point. The middle one just rotated 90 degrees around a vertical axis. The surface along its seam brightened the way a fish brightens when it angles to a light. The object then released 6 small points of light that fell like slow sparks, stopped above the water, and spread into a ring that matched the object's perimeter. The ring hung for 3 breaths, then faded. No splash, no steam. The object returned to its original orientation. The other 2 did nothing. A park ranger in Colorado sent one sentence that reads like a field note, and I will keep it as given. The disc shifted 10 meters east and then 10 south, then back, as if completing a grid square. That is a sentence written by a person trained to know what he does not know. It tells me more than any adjective. We have silence from a long-haul driver named Cole for the first time in an hour. Silence means he is either driving through a dead zone or concentrating. If you are in a truck on an open interstate tonight and need a human voice more than you need this broadcast, scan your dial for another. There are other voices keeping other rooms lit. That is the strength of radio. Another practical matter: pets. Several listeners report that dogs and cats stared at windows and then settled. Some refused to go out and then changed their minds when the small ovals moved away. If your animal is distressed, keep your routine as normal as possible. Animals know the difference between your fear and your calm. Your calm is worth something. I am going to read a pair of contrasting reports from the same city to show how varied this can be. Los Angeles. A resident in Koreatown says, a smaller oval hovered above a rooftop garden and traced a line of pale light along the length of the planters, as if scanning. It then slid to the next building, and did the same. At the same time, a photographer on Mulholland Drive texted that the disk over the basin brightened along one edge, revealing an interior honeycomb. In the honeycomb, something tall moved from one cell to the next, pausing in each. The photographer compared it to someone checking windows in a circular hallway. Both reports could be true, one object at street level doing close work, one larger object revealing internal motion. Chicago. The city set many signals to all flash to reduce grid draw. A listener near the river said the disk cast a moving shade that passed over high-rises and made office lights dim without fully going out. A maintenance worker on the 30th floor of a tower reported that his handheld radio dropped to static when he stood by the window and cleared when he stepped back. A second worker stood by, repeated the test, and got the same result. Two people, doing careful work, beat a single frightened clip every time. Paris. The rhythmic tone changed timbre, as if a filter was removed. In that moment, the crowd on the clip I played earlier grew quiet. The curtain fell again within the disc, stopped at the same height, and backlit 3 tall recesses. Silhouettes stood within. They did not move as a person moves. They elongated and shortened, as if the panel itself changed shape around them. That is as close as we are to seeing occupants. The descriptions fit panels and lighting as much as bodies. I repeat that we do not know. We have a message from a Coast Guard cutter off the New England shore. Official but unsensational. The vessel recorded a temporary loss of GPS lock within 1 mile of an oval, switched to inertial navigation, and proceeded without incident. Crew observed no wake and no effect on the sea surface beneath the oval. The cutter altered course to provide a wider berth as a matter of prudence and continued patrol. The last line reads, "No hazard to navigation observed at this time." I am trying to decide whether to share an observation from my own window that I cannot verify elsewhere yet. I will, on the condition that you treat it as a single data point. The 3 ovals offshore appear to adjust their position together in ways that obey a common rhythm. When the tone ladder reaches the 4th step, the left and right ovals shift a small measure outward, while the middle sinks a small measure lower. Then all 3 return to the original configuration on the pause. If this repeats, we have a clock. If it does not, I am imposing a pattern where none exists. I will keep watching and report back. Some of you want to know what to do in the morning. The answer depends on what the objects do by dawn. If they hold, public guidance will likely be to continue essential services with caution. If they depart, there will be a controlled rush to stand outside and look up. If they descend or change posture, authorities may ask people to shelter. In all cases, continue to think like a neighbor. Check on those near you. Keep your generator, if you have one, outside and away from windows. Share information quietly and clearly. A mathematician in Toronto sends a note I can read easily without a whiteboard. He says the 5-step ladder could be representing prime intervals if you treat each step as a unit and the pause as a marker. He also notes that the total cycle length is consistent in cities across time zones when corrected for transmission delay. He writes, "Either each object keeps perfect time, or they are following a common signal from outside our atmosphere." He adds, "I prefer the first because it requires fewer assumptions." I am grateful for a message from a listener in Kiev who writes with the economy of someone whose battery is low. He says the triangle of lights within the disk passed directly over the Motherland Monument, stopped, and then rotated once. The tone softened during that rotation. The metro announcements remained normal. He adds only this: the city did not hold its breath for them. It held it for us, so we would move together. That is the kind of line that travels farther than any signal. A quick return to Tokyo for something precise. The small ovals above intersections have begun to rotate at a very slow rate, 1 revolution every 2 minutes. The rotation aligns with crosswalk cycles, as if measuring the rhythm of the city itself. A transit control operator confirmed that signals proceed on normal timings. Nothing interfered with the cycle. The ovals simply mirrored it. Sydney reports that the beams over the harbor have now drawn rectangles that align with major buildings, then faded. A physicist watching from a balcony says the beam edges look diffraction limited, meaning very clean. That suggests a source with fine control. Her note ends with, "If this is mapping, then at least someone is taking careful notes." My own 3 ovals have shifted again in the rhythm I described. Left and right out on the 4th note. Middle down, return on the pause. It has happened 4 times in the same way. If I am right, then these units are talking to their parent disk in the sky with posture. That is not poetry. That is one device telling another what it is doing by where it puts itself in space. Engineers in the audience will have more precise words. I am receiving a handful of reports of very faint clicks heard on old analog radios when the tone ladder resets. If you own a vintage set with a good speaker, turn the volume low and listen at the end of the pause. You may hear something like a relay taking a breath. I have recorded the phenomenon here and will post it when lines are less crowded. Now to calm an understandable fear. No city has reported a physical effect on people exposed to the objects at low altitude beyond the quieting we have described during tone peaks. No burns, no sudden illness, no missing time. We are living in a moment that invites every myth. Keep your feet in the doorway between myth and measurement, and look both ways before you step. A cargo ship north of the Azores relayed a beautiful and unhelpful sentence via an officer of the watch. It reads, "The stars above the disk are ice, and the stars inside the disk are warm." I understand what he means. Colors change with the human eye when contrast is altered. By itself, the sentence cannot guide action, but it tells me a human stood on a deck and looked up long enough to write it. That act matters. I am going to step outside for 30 seconds, with the porch light off, and take a short recording for timestamp. The studio mic will stay on. You will hear room tone. If the mains dip, the batteries will bridge. I am back. The ovals have separated by a longer distance than before, as if making room for something between them. There is now a vertical shimmer on the water, where nothing stands. It is not a reflection. The surface looks calm, but a column of air or light or something like a lens runs from the sea up toward the disk, narrow as a flagpole and perfectly straight. I see nothing moving within it. I am shaking slightly because I am cold, and because no one taught me in school what to call this. A researcher at an observatory in the Canary Islands sent a line that I will pass along because it fits a pattern we can all see. She writes, "The objects favor geometry, as if our world were a classroom. They draw lines, they make rings, they pause for a count, they move in steps. It is not a language I can translate, but it is a subject I recognize." We are now well past the first frenzy of reports. This is the hour when tired people make careless mistakes. Do not handle fueled equipment indoors. Do not climb a roof to take a better photo. Do not block an intersection with your curiosity. Make small meals. Drink water. Plug your phone in, and then set it down. The objects are very good at holding still. You do not need to stare to keep them here. Before the top of the hour, a final sweep. New York. The disk over the park remains in place. The panels open and close. Silhouettes move within, still at a remove. A few small ovals map along the grid and return. London. The curtain falls and retracts on schedule with the tone. The river rolls. Bridge traffic is controlled. Kyiv. The triangle of lights rotates, pauses, rotates. The metro holds steady. Tokyo. Ovals hover above intersections in slow rotation timed to the city's own pulse. Sydney. Beams sketch clean geometry over water and stop. Across all of them, the same 5-step ladder, the same long pause, the same discipline. We will keep this channel open. The next blocks will include a short lesson on how to log what you see without loading it with fear, then a set of calls from working people in 5 cities whose jobs require them to stand on thresholds and watch for the rest of us. If anything changes beyond posture and pattern, I will say so clearly. If silence is what I have, I will share silence and let you hear the ladder and the hum in the wire. For those of you alone right now, I am going to leave you with the kind of list that has weight you can hold. Check the charge on your phone. Check the fuel on any small generator and place it outside if you intend to run it. Leave a note for yourself with the location of your flashlight and a spare battery. Fill a pitcher with water. Text one neighbor to say that you are awake and safe. Breathe in time with the pause between the 5 notes. That pause is long enough to set a cup down and think a clear thought. The column above the water is still present. The three ovals hold station around it. The disc overhead is either lower or my eyes are. The lighthouse beside me has no light of its own anymore, but the glass keeps its watch. If you need a place for your eyes, go to a lamp, a family photograph, a favorite book on a shelf, and let the sky be the sky until morning. This is Daniel, keeper of a station that was never meant to be important, speaking into a room that smells like coffee and salt. I will be here as long as the power holds and longer if the generator cooperates.